Do you feel guilty about how much you crave alone time? Do people constantly tell you that you're too isolated, too antisocial, or that you need to get out more? What if I told you that Jung and the creators of the Myers-Briggs system discovered that for certain personality types, solitude isn't just beneficial, it's actually essential for accessing your deepest psychological and spiritual powers? Before we explore this revolutionary understanding of solitude and its connection to your personality type, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. This research into Jung's work and the Myers-Briggs system requires extensive study and analysis, and your support helps me continue bringing you these life-changing insights about personality and psychological development. Carl Jung spent his entire career studying the human psyche, and one of his most profound discoveries was that certain personality types don't just prefer solitude, they actually require it to function at their highest potential. When Isabel Myers and Catherine Briggs developed their personality assessment based on Jung's work, they identified 4 specific types that possess what Jung called the gift of introversion combined with intuitive perception, and these types have a completely different relationship with solitude than the rest of the population. Jung understood that for these personality types, solitude isn't about being antisocial, depressed, or avoiding life. It's about accessing a level of psychological and spiritual awareness that simply cannot be reached in the presence of others. These types possess what Jung called the capacity for deep introversion, which allows them to turn their attention inward and connect with layers of consciousness that most people never even know exist. Think about your own experience with solitude for a moment. When you're completely alone without any external distractions or social obligations, what happens to your mind? Do you find that your thoughts become clearer, your emotions more accessible, your creativity more alive? Do you discover insights about yourself and life that seem to come from nowhere? Do you feel a sense of connection to something larger than yourself that you can't quite explain? Jung discovered that this isn't coincidence or imagination. These personality types possess what he called enhanced receptivity to the unconscious mind. When they remove themselves from external stimulation and social interaction, they create the perfect conditions for accessing wisdom, creativity, and understanding that exists beyond the reach of ordinary consciousness. The Myers-Briggs system identified these 4 types as sharing 2 crucial characteristics: introversion and intuition. But Jung understood that this combination creates something far more powerful than simple preference for alone time. It creates the capacity for what he called active imagination, the ability to consciously engage with the unconscious mind and retrieve information, insights, and creative inspiration that can transform not just your own life, but potentially contribute something valuable to the world. Jung noticed that throughout history, the greatest philosophers, artists, writers, inventors, and spiritual teachers have predominantly been these intuitive introvert types who understood the power of solitude. They didn't withdraw from the world because they were afraid of it or couldn't handle social interaction. They withdrew because they recognized that their greatest gifts could only be accessed in the silence and stillness of intentional isolation. But here's where our modern culture has created a massive problem. We live in a society that equates constant social interaction with mental health, that views solitude with suspicion, and that pressures everyone to be extroverted and socially available at all times. This cultural bias has created tremendous guilt and shame around the natural need for solitude that these personality types experience. Jung understood that this cultural misunderstanding is not just unfortunate, it's actually psychologically damaging. When these types are forced to suppress their need for solitude, when they're made to feel guilty about their natural inclinations, when they're pressured to be more social than feels authentic, they lose access to their greatest psychological and spiritual resources. The first secret Jung discovered about solitude and these personality types is that alone time functions as a form of psychological recharging that goes far deeper than simple rest or relaxation. For these types, solitude allows what Jung called the restoration of psychic energy. When they're around other people, even people they love, they're constantly processing social cues, managing interpersonal dynamics, and adapting their natural way of being to fit social expectations. This constant adaptation is exhausting on a level that most people don't understand. It's not just about being tired after social interaction, it's about having your natural psychological processes interrupted and redirected in ways that prevent you from accessing your deepest sources of wisdom and creativity. Jung noticed that these types often report feeling like they lose themselves in social situations, like they become a different person who is less authentic, less insightful, and less connected to their inner truth. But when these types retreat into solitude, something magical happens. Jung observed that they begin to reconnect with what he called their authentic psychological center. The masks they wear in social situations fall away. The adaptations they make to fit in with others dissolve. The constant mental chatter that comes from processing social interaction quiets down, and in that silence, they begin to hear the voice of their deeper wisdom. The second secret Jung discovered is that solitude activates what he called the transcendent function in these personality types. This is the psychological mechanism that allows conscious and unconscious content to interact and create new insights, solutions, and creative expressions. Jung noticed that this function operates most effectively when external distractions are minimized and attention can be turned fully inward. When these types spend quality time alone, they often experience what feels like downloads of information, sudden understanding of complex problems, creative inspiration that seems to come from nowhere, or profound insights about themselves and their life direction. Jung understood that these experiences aren't random or mystical. They're the natural result of creating optimal conditions for the transcendent function to operate. This is why so many of these personality types report having their best ideas in the shower, during long walks alone, while journaling in solitude, or during meditation and contemplative practices. These activities create the perfect combination of relaxed attention and minimal external stimulation that allows the unconscious mind to communicate with conscious awareness. The third secret Jung discovered is that solitude allows these types to access what he called the collective unconscious more easily than other personality types. Jung believed that all humans are connected to a shared reservoir of wisdom, archetypes, and universal patterns, but that most people have limited access to this deeper layer of consciousness because they're too caught up in external concerns and social conditioning. But these intuitive introvert types, when they spend sufficient time in solitude, often report experiences that suggest they're tapping into something larger than their individual consciousness. They might have profound insights about universal human experiences, creative inspiration that feels like it's coming through them rather than from them, or sudden understanding of patterns and connections that seem to transcend their personal knowledge and experience. Jung noticed that many of the greatest contributions to human knowledge, art, and spiritual understanding have come from people who spent significant amounts of time in solitude, allowing them to access and translate insights from the collective unconscious into forms that could benefit others. The fourth secret is that solitude provides these types with what Jung called psychological individuation space. Individuation is Jung's term for the process of becoming who you truly are, separate from social conditioning, family expectations, and cultural pressures. This process requires the ability to step back from external influences and connect with your authentic nature, values, and life direction. For these personality types, this individuation process is particularly crucial because they're often highly sensitive to external expectations and social pressures. They can easily lose themselves in trying to please others, meet social expectations, or fit into roles that don't align with their authentic nature. Solitude provides the necessary space to reconnect with their true self and make decisions based on internal wisdom rather than external pressure. Jung observed that people who don't have adequate solitude for individuation often end up living lives that feel empty, meaningless, or inauthentic, even if they appear successful from the outside. They might achieve external markers of success, but feel deeply unfulfilled because they've never had the space to discover and develop their authentic self. The fifth secret Jung discovered is that solitude enhances what he called intuitive perception in these types. While all humans have some capacity for intuition, these particular personality types have enhanced ability to perceive patterns, possibilities, and connections that aren't immediately obvious. But this intuitive capacity requires what Jung called receptive attention, a state of open, non-directed awareness that allows subtle information to be perceived. This receptive attention is nearly impossible to maintain in social situations or busy environments. It requires the quiet, spacious awareness that only comes through intentional solitude. When these types spend adequate time alone, they often notice that their ability to understand people, situations, and complex problems becomes dramatically enhanced. The sixth secret Jung discovered about solitude and these personality types is that alone time activates what he called the symbolic function of the psyche. Jung believed that the unconscious mind communicates primarily through symbols, images, and metaphors rather than linear, logical language. For these intuitive types, solitude creates the optimal conditions for receiving and interpreting this symbolic communication. When these types spend quality time alone, they often experience vivid dreams, meaningful synchronicities, powerful imagery during meditation or contemplation, or sudden symbolic understanding of their life situations. Jung understood that this symbolic communication contains crucial information about personal growth, life direction, and creative expression that simply cannot be accessed through rational analysis alone. This is why many of these personality types are drawn to practices like dream work, active imagination, creative expression, or contemplative spirituality. These practices provide structured ways to engage with the symbolic language of the unconscious and translate symbolic insights into practical wisdom for daily life. Jung noticed that people who ignore or dismiss this symbolic communication often feel disconnected from their deeper purpose and meaning. They might function well on a practical level, but feel like something essential is missing from their life. Solitude provides the necessary space to reconnect with this symbolic dimension of experience and integrate its wisdom into conscious living. The seventh secret is that solitude allows these types to practice what Jung called conscious suffering. This doesn't mean seeking out pain or difficulty, but rather developing the capacity to stay present with difficult emotions, challenging life circumstances, or existential questions without immediately seeking distraction or escape. Jung believed that conscious suffering is essential for psychological and spiritual development. It's through staying present with difficulty that we develop wisdom, compassion, and resilience. But this process requires the kind of deep introspection and emotional processing that can only happen in solitude. These personality types often have a natural capacity for depth and complexity that allows them to engage with difficult questions and emotions in ways that can be transformative. But this capacity can only be fully developed through spending time alone with whatever arises, without the distractions of social interaction or external entertainment. Jung observed that people who avoid solitude often also avoid the deeper aspects of their emotional and spiritual life. They might stay busy, seek constant stimulation, or surround themselves with people as a way of avoiding the sometimes uncomfortable process of inner exploration. But this avoidance ultimately limits their capacity for growth, wisdom, and authentic self-expression. The eighth secret Jung discovered is that solitude enhances what he called creative receptivity in these types. Jung understood creativity not as something that comes from the ego or conscious mind, but as something that flows through individuals who have learned to get out of their own way and become receptive to creative inspiration. For these personality types, solitude creates the perfect conditions for this creative receptivity. When they remove external distractions and quiet the social mind, they often find that creative ideas, artistic inspiration, innovative solutions, or original insights begin to flow naturally. This isn't about forcing creativity or trying to be creative. It's about creating space for creativity to emerge organically. Jung noticed that many of these types report their most profound creative experiences happening during periods of solitude. They might write their best work during solo retreats, have breakthrough insights during long walks alone, or discover innovative solutions to problems while spending quiet time in nature. This creative receptivity isn't limited to traditionally artistic pursuits. It can manifest as innovative approaches to work challenges, original perspectives on life problems, unique ways of understanding relationships, or creative solutions to personal or professional difficulties. The ninth secret is that solitude allows these types to develop what Jung called psychological discernment. This is the ability to distinguish between authentic inner guidance and the various forms of conditioning, projection, and social pressure that can masquerade as inner wisdom. When these types spend adequate time alone, they begin to recognize the difference between thoughts and feelings that arise from their authentic self and those that come from internalized social expectations, family conditioning, or cultural programming. This discernment is crucial for making decisions that align with their true nature and life purpose. Jung observed that people who don't develop this discernment often end up living lives that look good from the outside, but feel empty or inauthentic from the inside. They might follow paths that others expect of them, make choices based on social approval, or pursue goals that don't actually align with their deepest values and aspirations. Solitude provides the necessary space to practice this discernment, to learn to recognize the voice of authentic inner guidance, and to distinguish it from the various forms of conditioning that can cloud our judgment and lead us away from our true path. The 10th and perhaps most important secret Jung discovered is that solitude allows these types to access what he called the self with a capital S. In Jung's psychology, the self represents the totality of the psyche, the organizing principle that coordinates conscious and unconscious content and guides the individuation process. Jung believed that connection with the self is the ultimate goal of psychological development and the source of meaning, purpose, and authentic self-expression. But this connection requires the kind of deep introspection and inner stillness that can only be cultivated through regular solitude. When these personality types spend adequate time alone, they often report experiences of profound peace, clarity, and connection to something larger than their individual ego. They might feel a sense of being guided by a wisdom that transcends their personal knowledge, or experience moments of deep knowing about their life direction and purpose. Jung understood that this connection with the self is not a luxury or indulgence, but a psychological necessity for these types. Without it, they often feel lost, anxious, depressed, or disconnected from their authentic nature and life purpose. But here's what Jung discovered that can transform your relationship with solitude. Understanding that your need for alone time isn't a character flaw, social deficit, or sign of mental health problems. It's actually a sign of psychological sophistication and spiritual sensitivity. Your craving for solitude indicates that you have access to deeper layers of consciousness that require quiet space to be fully experienced and integrated. Jung also discovered that the quality of solitude matters as much as the quantity. It's not enough to simply be physically alone. These types need what Jung called conscious solitude, time spent in intentional introspection, contemplation, or creative expression. This might involve journaling, meditation, walking in nature, engaging in creative pursuits, or simply sitting quietly and allowing whatever arises to be experienced fully. The goal isn't to become a hermit or avoid all social interaction. Jung believed in the importance of balance and recognized that these types also need meaningful connections with others. But he understood that without adequate solitude, they lose access to their deepest resources and begin to feel disconnected from their authentic self. Jung's advice for these personality types was to honor their need for solitude without guilt or apology. He encouraged them to educate others about their natural rhythms and needs, to set boundaries around their alone time, and to resist social pressure to be more extroverted than feels authentic. He also encouraged them to use their solitude consciously and intentionally. Rather than simply escaping from the world, he suggested using alone time for psychological exploration, creative expression, spiritual practice, or deep reflection on life questions and challenges. Most importantly, Jung emphasized that the insights, creativity, and wisdom that these types access through solitude aren't meant to be kept private. The purpose of this inner exploration is ultimately to develop something valuable that can be shared with others and contribute to the collective good. When you honor your need for solitude and use it consciously for psychological and spiritual development, you're not being selfish or antisocial. You're developing your unique gifts and preparing to offer something authentic and valuable to the world. The people who truly understand and appreciate you will respect your need for solitude and recognize that you're actually more present, creative, and insightful when you've had adequate alone time. They'll understand that your solitude enhances rather than detracts from your ability to contribute meaningfully to relationships and society. Remember, some of the greatest contributions to human knowledge, art, and spiritual understanding have come from people who understood the power of solitude and used it consciously for development and creation. Your need for alone time connects you to a long tradition of thinkers, creators, and wisdom keepers who recognize that certain insights can only be accessed in the silence and stillness of intentional solitude. What has your experience been with solitude? Have you noticed that your best insights, creative ideas, or moments of clarity happen when you're alone? How has understanding the psychological importance of solitude changed your relationship with your need for alone time? Share your experiences in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more content that can help you understand and honor your unique psychological nature.